when dad has to talk to you, son. When you're really young, there's like a face-to-face. At a certain point, it starts to become, you take a walk with dad, or you're in the car with dad, you're off to his shoulder. Now, I'm not sure how men handle daughters, but you see, you have to handle boys like this, because men who have survived to this time, at some point, had ancestors who survived marching. Yes, like in armed forces of some sort, or in some way had to traverse places over and over again to escape disaster. They're bred from people who worked. Men work shoulder to shoulder, typically. It's actually the way. It seems it's completely, both teleological and evolutionary, and it becomes then eventually a major part of our symbol system. Because of the import of the differences between facing rightward and leftward. So, there's even a line in Taoism, let me illustrate it, where it talks about the funeral position, that when armies form together, or when you see a line of generals, they're already in the position for funerary. So it's the nature of the army and the armed forces, that their nature is death. That's why they naturally follow the funerary procession. I'd have to find the line, it's very good. So, women are finding in an age when we have to, we live by the sweat of our brow, and that everybody is. Nobody's making, that really very, very, very few people are making passive income. When it comes to most people are not making passive income. Most people, as soon as things get real tough, huge numbers of people will have basically a handful of days of money and food. And then they're going to be like, what the fuck do I do? Even your hero here pretty much has probably a good month's worth of things, but I mean, very little protein. So, now that women are looking at this, they're like, look at me, I'm working like a man. Look at me. Yeah, you're working like somebody bred to be in a phalanx, or to be most likely a form of enslaved or conscripted labor. Historically speaking, it's only really within about the last 200 years has like the world come to this thing known, has found out that there's a thing called an individual. A lot of people don't really get, like, no, that individuation, that the concepts around that, and like I own property, I own things. There's people to this day, Aaron Clarey still has to give people of Hispanic descent the advice, you have to let your parents make it on their own. You were not born to be their like cattle, like you're not their beast of burden. They're not supposed to make it, you're not supposed to take care of them when they're old. This is America. They have to take care of themselves. That very concept that you, as an individual, and the child in the family, grow up and you are now an individual completely on your own with your own household. That's a very American thing. That's Americans who there's more than enough space for them to move away, where they can't, as was it Oliver was saying, that you're not too close to your neighbor because you cannot any longer hear their axe fall on a tree. So this idea that you would be some individuated man who then becomes their own head of their own family, extending the line, but that you might have left behind, like the land where you were from, for good, and only could communicate through letters. Like that, and it was simply because you had to. There's this period of this concept that settlement in the United States was pleasant. The only pleasant time has been pretty much the time which humans who are alive now have seen. This is pretty much the only time in human history that's been, like, pleasant. That you could just sit around and kind of think about yourself. Like, what am I going to do? Like, this idea, actually, that there are humans who can sit and think, what should I do today? Like, that very concept is like a novelty that no one could have ever imagined throughout time, because there's always something that's desperately needed to be done by humans at all times, pretty much up until living memory. And you find people that are like, I have nothing to do, there is nothing at all to do, something like that. So I started thinking about this, that there was a toxic masculinity thing, and that, women are still clinging to this. I think this one's going to last for a very long time, because of the desperate need that there's many thirsty men out there, that a lot of them, they have female siblings, and they're full-grown adults, and their sister can't be a loser. That's a big part of it. Their mom and their sisters can't be losers. And it can't be that they're kind of lunatics and over-emotional. You can't have that. They can't, psychologically, they can't handle that idea. That it's like, no. They're out of their wits. They're over-emotional. They need to understand things. Men have, wonderfully, something that has already been taught within the last 200 years, and that's disinterestedness. This was something that is taught by the Freemasons. This isn't a Freemasonic idea. This is an idea that is normal to the human psyche, mostly coming out of Stoicism. But that this, and really in British, it's very much British culture. Disinterestedness, that you simply don't take interest in something, and you observe. Use observantia, and that would have been a big thing. They would have been countering it with the concept of observantia from science, rather than interest, which is your interest in what you want to see, and that you should be, and that you will be happy. Because of the idea that because they're a post-Enlightenment kind of fraternal order, they would have been kind of giving this idea across of, one, to help men become better men, in that you're not allowing your emotions to be swayed. The second part, where this is an Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment virtue, that you are acting more scientifically, inherently, and you're not letting your emotions be swayed. So you're using observantia rather than interestedness. So disinterestedness. This is not popular in the present period. There's this, and this is something I think, like, people like Hood Servative and others, this idea, like, does every singer with dreads have to wave them around like Bob Marley? Or try to sound like Bob Marley? Like Wyclef Jean, like, there's just so many people you can name that they're always trying so hard to be like Bob Marley, and which shows, like, how little reggae and that kind of music, Jamaican music, that they're familiar with, that they're familiar with Bob Marley, not like, not like, Ken Booth, it's just, there's a number of people that I'm like, this is a kind of a, yeah. So, but that display of emotionality for especially male performers, in a way makes sense. You know, I mean, it's to accent the music, accent the role. There's this idea of men, you know, showing but it really does come through some kind of playing of a role. And as people are also trying to be kind of public figures and influencers and be like a movie star on their cell phone and such like, oh, you know, that it's also that kind of thing. Like, oh, well, you know, this idea of like, you find these people who they don't control their emotions. They're public influencers who their emotions are on their sleeve. Some of them have become rather infamous for this, and there's a whole lore on the internet now about them, you know, because of how like emotional that they'll get and stuff, and that it'll end up blowing up in their face, you know, or blowing up in a pill bottle, because it's funny. And so, whoa. So, the whole thing about the toxic masculinity thing that keeps hitting me is that there's men that show disinterestedness, which is actually kind of an advanced thing in one's psyche, and which then makes it really does start to come through more and more of, well, but these emotional men are much easier to make simp. You know, emotional men will simp. The disinterested men won't. And that's what really more and more I'm kind of thinking that's what this all comes down to. Because the more I think about like the good of disinterestedness, the more like, yeah, I think this is really about that men who acting in their kind of goofy self-interest, their immature self-interest acting on emotion are much easier to manipulate. And that's and nothing more than that. Especially if they have very little willpower and don't train much and don't discipline their appetites. So, yeah, just some stuff I was thinking.